Story 1. The Earthling that grounded the skyscrapers. In the neon-drenched corridors of Gigapolis, where stars are outshone by the city's glow, there's a watering hole that's a microcosm of the cosmos itself, the Milky Wayfarer. As for me, the name's Gary, but you can call me Gaz. I'm the maestro of mixers, the sultan of spirits at this establishment, and I've got stories that could fill a black hole with chatter. Take this one evening, for instance, when old Joe wandered in. Joe was as human as they come, an oddity in these parts. He always found his way to the same corner of the bar, sinking into the shadows like a nebula cloud wrapping around a moon. His drink of choice? A concoction so potent we jokingly called it the Solstice Slam. It's basically ethanol with a kick that could launch a cargo ship. The Milky Wayfarer's patrons are a varied bunch, from the Zogwarts to the Gormaks, but none stood taller than the Skyscrapers. My nickname for the Kawas, those avian giants who strut around like they own the galaxy. On this particular night, two of them decided to roost by Joe, their feathers a stark contrast to the humans' unassuming garb. The Skyscrapers, named Twek and Creel for the sake of this tale, were notorious for stirring up asteroid storms. They looked at Joe like he was a new species of space grub, something to be toyed with before being devoured. Their approach to conversation was as subtle as a supernova, and just as gentle. "So, Groundwalker, speak any of the high languages or just that primitive babble of yours?" Twek asked, a sneer hidden beneath his beak. Joe, for his part, just swiped on his info slate, a finger traveling through virtual pages of human literature, a comfort from home. It was a silent rebuke to the Skyscrapers' taunts, but they weren't the type to be ignored. Creel leaned in closer, his shadow engulfing Joe's table. Maybe it's true what they say, that humans only understand the language of fists and fury. The bar hushed, sensing the impending spectacle. Even the Zogwarts paused their tentacle wrestling contest. Joe lifted his head, finally, and locked eyes with the Skyscrapers. "We speak many languages," he said, his voice steady as a starship's thrusters, "including the language of respect, which seems to be missing from your vast vocabulary." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Disrespecting Skyscrapers was like juggling live plasma grenades. It's only a matter of time before things go boom. Twek's feathers stood on end, a sure sign of agitation. "You dare mock us, little Groundwalker? Mocking?" Joe's smile widened. No, just stating an observation." A lesser man would have quaked in his space boots, but Joe's grin was undeterred, even when Creel reached over and took Joe's drink, downing it in one go. The Skyscraper's throat bobbed, and a second later, a sound like a hyperdrive failing emanated from him. "Evidently, your bodies can't cash the checks your mouths are writing," Joe said, that smile never wavering. Creel gurgled, his eyes watering as the rest of the Milky Wayfarer erupted in laughter. Even his comrade, Twek, couldn't suppress a chuckle. But a Skyscraper's pride is a delicate thing, and the laughter was like a laser cutting through their ego. Twek stood, knocking his stool over, the sound thunderous in the sudden silence. "This human has offended not just us, but our entire flock." A Skyscraper flock descending on my bar was the last thing I needed. I was already tallying the costs of the damages in my head. But Joe, he stood up, and the whole bar seemed to lean in. "Look, I didn't come here to make enemies," Joe said, his gaze sweeping over the flock that had started to gather. "But I'm not going to be pecked at by a couple of birds who can't handle their drink." Twek lunged then, his taloned hand aiming for Joe's face. But Joe, he was quicker than he looked. He dodged, grabbed Twek's arm, and with a move that had the elegance of a dancer and the precision of a laser scalpel, had Twek pinned against the bar, his own arm twisted at his back. "You could have been a friend," Joe told Twek, his voice a low murmur now. But you chose to be a lesson instead. The bar was so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the neon signs. Creel, still recovering from the solstice slam, looked from his trapped comrade to Joe and back again. Then, the unexpected happened. Creel laughed. It was a raspy sound, but genuine. "All right, Groundwalker," Creel conceded. "You've made your point." Joe released Tweck, who straightened his feathers, somewhat deflated, but unharmed. "No hard feelings?" Joe asked, extending a hand in peace. Tweck looked at it, then at Joe, and finally took it. No hard feelings. It was more of a squawk than speech, but it carried the weight of a truce. The bar slowly returned to its usual cacophony, patrons whispering about the human who'd just become a legend. I poured another solstice slam, slid it to Joe, and raised an eyebrow. "On the house," I said, "for the entertainment." He accepted with a nod, the shadows once again claiming him as he returned to his corner and his info slate. But now, there was a newfound respect in the glances that followed him through the crowd. The Skyscrapers, meanwhile, found a new roost far from Joe's table. They were quieter now, their earlier bravado clipped like a pair of wings in a gravity well. And as the night wore on, the story of Joe and the Skyscrapers became a fresh entry in the Milky Wayfarer's history, a tale that would be retold with each new patron that crossed the threshold. So, if you ever drift into Gigapolis and find yourself at the Milky Wayfarer, keep an eye out for a human in a black coat, nursing a drink that could fuel a starship. He might share a story, or he might just share a drink. But one thing's for sure. He's earned his place among the stars and the stories they hold. And to the skyscrapers of the cosmos who might feel their feathers ruffled, remember the lesson of the solstice slam. Humility might not be as intoxicating, but it's sure as stars won't leave you sprawling. That's the expanded tale of Joe, the Skyscrapers, and a bar at the edge of the known universe where every being, regardless of their planet of origin, can become a legend over a glass of something strong. Cheers, Gaz. Story 2. Words that shape the galaxy. By the time the warp skips had spat us out onto the grinding gulch, I'd learned a thing or two about rolling with the punches, or in my case, the gravitational anomalies. I mean, you have to laugh at the irony, right? One day you're translating legal jargon for bored bureaucrats on Earth, and the next, you're a sideshow attraction for an alien overlord with more spikes than a punk rock jacket. Was it? Overlord Grax rumbled as I was shoved into his grand, garishly ornate chamber. His voice was like gravel tumbling down a metal chute. "Yeah, that's me. Emma for long, M for short, and hey you for when you're mad," I quipped, dusting off my jumpsuit with what dignity I had left. Grax leaned back on his throne, a monstrosity of metal and glowing stones that looked like a prop from a low-budget sci-fi flick. "You speak our tongue?" he asked, a brow, or what passed for a brow on his bumpy head, arching. "A bit," I admitted. "Picked it up from the guards. They love to chat." The Overlord's assistant, a weaselly little fellow I'd taken to calling Sniv, squirmed beside him. "My lord, she's the one who—" "I know who she is, Sniv," Grax snapped, shooting a glare that could peel paint. "She's the one who didn't blast a hole through Jarn's head when she had the chance." Sniv nodded, his head bobbing like it was on a spring. "Yes, my lord. Most unorthodox." I shrugged, though my heart was doing a samba in my chest. Seemed like a waste of a good blaster shot. Rocks don't dodge. Grax let out a sound that I took for a chuckle, though it could have been a precursor to an earthquake. "Sit, Em. Drink some sour spurt. Refreshing if you like the taste of battery acid." I declined with a wave of my hand. "I'll pass. Acid isn't really my thing, burns the tongue." "You're a peculiar human," Grax said, studying me like I was the latest puzzle he'd ordered from intergalactic Amazon. Most would have used the opportunity to seek vengeance. Most haven't had my mom's grounding in practicality. Vengeance is a luxury in short supply where I come from. Grax nodded slowly as if I were a riddle he was close to solving. You saved a guard's life. Why? Seemed like the thing to do. He was pinned, screaming like a banshee. I figured, hey, I've got 2 hands. There's a blaster on the ground. 1 + 1 = 2. Besides, dead men tell no tales, but live ones owe you a favor. The Overlord laughed, and it was clear he wasn't used to the sound. It came out as a series of staccato bursts. Clever girl? I expected groveling, or at the very least, defiance, not humor. Yeah, well, humor's kept me alive longer than groveling ever did, I retorted, standing my ground despite feeling like a mouse under a magnifying glass. Grax rose to his feet, an eclipse in armor. I have a proposition for you, Em. A role that requires someone unpredictable, someone who can see the humor in the darkness. I raised an eyebrow. Does it come with dental? He paused, then roared with laughter. You'll be the death of me, human, but perhaps that's what I need, a reminder of mortality. Very well, you'll have your dental and a position at my side. Let's see if this humor can cut through the drudgery of daily tyranny. I couldn't help the smile that crept onto my face. Deal, but only if I get to rename the sour spurt. That stuff needs a rebrand. Grax considered, then nodded once. Agreed. Welcome to the Grinding Gulch, Em, the human who spared a guard and bargained with an overlord. And that's how I became a translator, turned miner, turned royal advisor. If you can't beat 'em, make 'em laugh, I guess, or at least keep 'em guessing.